So the people who have sleep apnea syndrome, so have all the daytime fatigue and all the symptoms, that's only maybe 9%. If you have some type of sleep disorder breathing, that's more like 49%.
Wow. I'm Jill Angelo, host of the Geneve podcast series for women's health in midlife. I speak with the most forward-thinking experts in the health and wellness industries. These experts are helping women 40 plus feel confident and in control of their health in the most vibrant years of their lives. So join us on this journey of women's health. Women are 3 times more likely to develop sleep apnea after menopause than before. And with sleep apnea comes a higher risk of depression, stroke, diabetes, anxiety, even dementia. Because it's so impactful on our health, we turn to Dr. Katharine Christian, dentist and specialist in dental sleep medicine. Dental director of the Seattle Snoring and Sleep Apnea Center and board certified by the American Academy of Dental Sleep Medicine, Dr. Christian has been helping patients get a good night's sleep for nearly 2 decades. First of all, I think, sleep is such a precious thing, especially as you get into midlife. I think women start to really experience some changes with their sleep patterns, and for a number of reasons related to what's going on in the body in midlife and menopause. But one area in particular is sleep apnea that we hear a lot from the women in our community. Can you explain, Dr. Kate, a little bit more what's happening in the body, and if there's a correlation between it and what's going on in menopause? Feel free to kind of expound into that too.
So sleep apnea is when your body either forgets to breathe or can't breathe for whatever reason. So there's 2 types of sleep apnea. One is central sleep apnea, and that's your body's forgetting to breathe. There's obstructive sleep apnea where your body can't breathe, and then there's a mixture of both where you start, forgetting to breathe because you can't breathe for so long. Your body doesn't think that breathing is something they has to do. When we lose hormonal protection, our rates of sleep apnea go up. So pre-menopause, we are tossing and turning and never going and actually stopping breathing. After menopause, our rates of apnea go up to that immense, and we're just kind of riding through that apneic episode.
That's interesting that our hormonal changes take down our defenses. What's happening in the body?
It changes the arousal threshold. So the amount of deoxygenation that you need to wake up your brain changes. And so I think it's progesterone that really activates and oh, no, that's not good, need to change position. And when we lose that, it takes more to get that arousal.
Interesting. So actually, our bodies are maybe forgetting to breathe when we're sleeping pre-menopause, before the progesterone before it starts to decline in the body. It's just that the response is what's changed as progesterone is declining.
So there's something called upper airway resistance syndrome, and that happens primarily in premenopausal women. So you get where you look at during a sleep study, you'll see the brain waking up and the body position may be changing, but not an actual apneic event. So an apnea is, we define it with the apnea-hypopnea index. An apnea is where you completely stop breathing. A hypopnea is where you're under breathing, and both are associated with a 10% drop in oxygen level. And so if you are having an apneic event, but you're not getting that 10% drop in blood oxygen because your brain is waking up and something is changing, that doesn't actually count as towards that apnea-hypopnea index and how we define sleep apnea.
And are certain women more prone to this than others?
So women who are either have a larger body mass index or are hypermobile and just that long skinny neck.
And one last question around just kind of this demographic. How about the differences between women and men? Do you see in your patients, are more women suffering from apnea than men, or how would you compare between the sexes?
So men's apneic rate peaks as soon as they reach adulthood. And so starting at age 18, that about half of men are going to have some type of sleep disorder breathing. For women, the rate really peaks after menopause.
Okay.
And then our rates are equal to men's.
Okay. Fascinating. Okay, so what I'm really excited about is we often do these podcasts with physicians and experts, but in this case, Dr. Kate, you also brought one of your patients, Sonya. Thank you for joining us today. And Sonya, tell us a little bit about what you have suffered from and what drove you to come and see Dr. Kate.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's so interesting to hear her talk about sleep apnea. So really, as I'm 57 now, and as a few years ago, I noticed that I would have dreams where I felt like I was underwater and I couldn't get to the surface to breathe. And then my friend actually works for a doctor, and she's the one that told me, I think you have, sleep apnea, and you should come in or you should go to a doctor and get it checked, go have a sleep study. And she told me that it's very typical, the kind of underwater dreams, and it's really scary. You just can't get your air, and then all of a sudden you wake up, and I think that's when you're gasping. I didn't really know what sleep apnea was, but interestingly, like my father, back in the day, in the 70s, we used to think it was funny. He would snore and hold his breath for a really long time and then make funny noises. We just thought it was funny. Never heard anything about sleep apnea. And consequently, my father had a heart attack, and I have to wonder, later in life and having learned a little bit more, was that a cause? Because, I've heard that, sleep apnea, untreated sleep apnea can cause all kinds of health problems. And I think I was at the age where I'm like, I want to get back to being active. I'm getting older, some things are starting to go awry, and I just want to fix what I can fix and try to get in better shape. I needed to lose a lot of weight. I've since been working on that, but I want to take care of the sleep apnea. So I had the sleep study, and I was diagnosed with sleep apnea. I think it's just I think doctor's middle my numbers were 15. So
yeah.
Is that?
That's the borderline between mild to moderate.
Yeah, so it wasn't.
And what's involved in the sleep study? What did you have to go through?
So for me, I went, my doctor was at a local, Swedish here in Seattle, and they just had me do a home test, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So they gave me a little machine, and I just hooked up the monitors to myself at night, and I can't remember if it was more than one night or if it's just a few nights.
They often do. So sometimes you do only one night,
yeah,
and sometimes you do a multi-night study because there is night-to-night variability.
I think it was a couple of nights, but anyway, so that's all I had done, and it was enough to say, well, you have moderate sleep apnea. So I tried the CPAP machine, and I'm really kind of a claustrophobic person. And I also
and the CPAP machine, for those who don't know what that is, it's a mask that you strap on,
right?
And you get it a certain tightness so that it actually works in terms of the air pressure.
And there's a hose, and it's a noise, and I was always a good sleeper, but I like things to be quiet. Mm-hmm. So I'm also that claustrophobic. So I tried there's a couple different masks you can wear, the full mask that covers your nose and mouth. And that was a total freak out session. I just couldn't deal with that at all. And I tried really hard because clearly I wanted to fix this. I was on a mission to try to get healthier. So then they have a thing called the pillows, which is just a nose thing. But then if you open your mouth at night, which I do, that doesn't work either, because then the air is shooting through your mouth, and it's awful. And so then they want to give you this strap that just reminds me of the Scrooge ghost that had to tie his whole jaw up with a thing,
to keep your mouth shut.
Yes, and I'm that was even worse because.
And describe, Sonya, the sleep pillow.
So it's just, instead of the full mask that covers your nose and mouth, it's just something that goes in your nostrils.
Okay.
But then you need to keep your mouth shut, and if you don't do that, that's not going to work either. So it took me, I tried both of these things, and it was a couple of weeks of going back, and I just told them, I cannot do this. There's no way.
So what did you say then, Dr. Kate, in terms of the next option for Sonya?
The next most common treatment is what I do is an oral appliance for sleep apnea, and it's been shown to be equally as effective as CPAP for people with mild to moderate sleep apnea. And it holds your jaw a little bit open and a little bit forward. So I like to think of CPAP as active. You crank up the pressure and it acts as a pneumatic splint, holding everything open. And what we do is passive. We hold your jaw in that sweet spot of just a little bit open, a little bit forward, and that allows things when they collapse, or when things are relaxed, they collapse, but not enough to actually stop breathing.
Okay. And Sonya, that's working for you now.
It does work, and it worked from the very first night, honestly. Wow. So I was pretty amazed. And I haven't had any, as long as I wear my appliance, and every once in a while I take a break from it, just that I really don't like to even go anywhere. And that's the beauty of it too. Traveling, you're only taking this little thing instead of having to take a CPAP with you. And I don't have any more of those underwater dreams. So that right there is proof to me that it's working, because they will start again if I don't wear it.
So underwater dreams was a signal to you that something was going on. What are other signals, Dr. Kate, that you've seen in other patients? It sounds like there's a waking up, but how do women know? Maybe I should go get this checked out, because it was the dreams for you, Sonya, but what else?
Extreme daytime fatigue. You're getting enough hours of sleep, but you're still feeling sleepy during the day, especially in that afternoon, that dip in the afternoon feels more like a crash. Waking up with a morning headache, that's a clear sign that your oxygen is dropping at night. Morning migraines. Having sleep apnea is a common migraine trigger. Chronic kind of pain, it's really related to fibromyalgia. And actually anything that is chronic that is hard to treat. So if you're having problems treating your blood sugar or your blood pressure, that's when we look at sleep apnea, because it's just, if you have this variable going on, it's hard to control with other diseases.
And are there varying degrees of sleep apnea?
Yeah, so it's normal to have a pause in breathing as we transition through stages of sleep, and so that's up to 5 times per hour. 5 to 15 stops in breathing is considered mild, 15 to 30 is moderate, and 30 and above is severe.
And that's per hour?
Per hour.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And more than likely, a person is not waking up at every one of those transitions. How frequently, typically, does this wake people? Because I think that's the most, that's the sign that you do have apnea more than anything. There's more subtles.
So if you are waking up in the middle of the night and your heart is racing and you're sweaty, and that is a clear apneic event sign. If you're waking up, so it's normal. If you're waking up once to twice a night to go to the restroom, yeah, it's okay. It's not pleasant, but that's okay. But if you're waking up 5, 6 times and you have a full bladder each time, that is not normal. When you are asleep and you're in good restorative sleep, your urine production turns off. So that shouldn't be happening.
Wow. Well, that was me.
Really?
Yeah, so I totally, besides the dreams where I was, felt like I was choking, I used to sleep through the night completely, and then as I got older, I would maybe get up once to go to the bathroom at night. But I think as the sleep apnea got better, I was getting up 4 or 5, even 6 times a night. So, and I knew I wasn't getting restorative sleep of any sort, because I was getting up like almost every hour.
So in that state then, your body is not shutting down kind of urine production like it typically does, and so you were going to the bathroom a lot.
Yeah.
And not necessarily because you were drinking so much water.
Nope.
No.
And I was very tired, as doctor said. It just like, you're just so tired. You're like, how am I gonna get? Mostly in the afternoon, it would just hit you, and I would wish sometimes I would have to go take a nap, really. But it's hard to do when you're working. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm. The frequent wakening prevents that deep restorative sleep where your body can heal, and that's how it causes that kind of generalized. So you don't rebound from activities or surgeries like you normally do, because you don't get that deep restorative sleep physically, and that's the beginning of the night. And at the end of the night, where we have more dream sleep, you stop dreaming, and so the memory consolidation also you have issues with.
Interesting. Yeah. So let's talk about hereditary, or if this is hereditary. Sonya, you mentioned your dad. You didn't realize he had apnea. Is sleep apnea, this is a question for you, Dr. Kate, is sleep apnea hereditary? And if your parent or family member has it, are you doomed to get it? Like, how do you counsel patients through that?
You are much more likely to get it. You're not definitely going to get it, but much more likely. I like to say is just like we get the outside from our family, we get the inside too. And so I'm hypermobile, my kids are hypermobile, we just are more collapsible. And that there are things you can do as kids are growing to help kind of shape that. And there are things you can do as an adult to kind of be, if you have this family history, to be more aware of it and to try and get things early.
What are some of those things?
It's really about maintaining your body mass index and maintaining muscle tone, and just trying to there are muscles in your throat that you can exercise and create tone in the back of your throat, of really thinking about how you are breathing and how you're holding your tongue position in your mouth, and just making sure you're using everything properly. And just being aware and being on it and not letting things get to so that they're really bad before you treat it.
And are some of those tips things that are published or a resource that we could even give to our listeners after this podcast?
There's a great video of, I think it was the University of Michigan, where they go through some exercises you can do for your mouth and tongue to increase the tone in the back of your throat. They're weird, and you have to do them for half an hour every day. But if you do, it really can, for people with sleep apnea, it's been shown to move people one category of sleep apnea. Also, picking up the didgeridoo or the oboe has also been shown to increase the tone in the back of the throat.
Interesting. And how about in children? You said there are things you can start to do with your kids.
So for my kids, it's really about training proper breathing and making sure that the kids are breathing through their nose, that their tongue is sitting inside their mouth, that everything kind of fits in their mouth. And so for one of my children, we've done allergy shots, and that's made a huge difference. And for my other daughter, we had to take her tonsils and adenoids out, and that made a huge difference. And for both of my kids, it's been early orthodontia to create space in their mouth for their tongue, as well as this, training proper tongue posture.
This broadcast is brought to you in part by the amazing women at Prime Women. Prime is a lifestyle guide for living well, not just living long. They provide a fresh perspective through articles written by Prime Women for Prime Women on fashion, travel, fitness, beauty, finances, relationships, and entertainment. Be sure to check them out at primewomen.com. Sonya, you came to see Dr. Kate. At what point does insurance cover it, first and foremost? What's the process through that?
It did cover mine. I did have a portion that I paid. I don't remember how much it was, but it covered a really good portion of it. So that was great. But I would have paid for it, and honestly, because I wasn't going to do the CPAP, and I wanted to fix it. So I think it's worth the investment, just like if you're going to buy yourself a good pair of glasses. If you want to fix things, then you need to figure out a way.
Yeah, and you're feeling much better.
I am. I have tons more energy. I don't have that, that afternoon crash anymore. I've been losing weight, so that's helped too. One thing I was going to ask about, when I went to the sleep study, the sleep doctor said that I had a very small airway, and I didn't know if that could be genetic, but also because I'm overweight, that was probably part of it. So I was thinking, people have smaller airways. Is that something that's genetic?
Oh yeah. So you get, like I said, the insight just from the outside.
Yeah.
So you can, unfortunately, you can lose weight and still have sleep apnea. Yeah. And I have plenty of skinny people who have
my dad
sleep
was
apnea.
skinny. Yeah, he was a little guy, and so that's why I'm thinking it's probably a lot of genetics for me, of the small airway. I also have gigantic tonsils. I did not want to have those removed as an adult. So far, so good. Knock on wood. So, yeah.
One last question around the sleep study. So did you go to a sleep doctor who then referred you to Dr. Kate?
Yes.
Okay.
So sleep apnea has to be diagnosed from a physician and through a sleep study. That's the only way to know whether or not what your brain is doing and what your breathing pattern is doing while you're sleeping.
And have you seen any correlation between sleep apnea and more chronic things like a heart attack? You mentioned your father had one, but more chronic illnesses in people?
Yeah. So I mean, if you have something that you have have trouble controlling, the sleep, that's where our body gets restored. And if you're not getting that good restorative sleep, it affects every system. So I have a patient who is diabetic because he has sleep apnea. And he knows his sleep apnea is not well controlled. If his blood sugar, it can't be controlled. I have lots of patients who are in my chair because they have AFib. And when we control the apnea, the AFib is much easier to control. When your body is not getting to that deep restorative sleep, your blood pressure stays high all night. And so there's a normal spike in blood pressure right before we get up. And if your blood pressure's been elevated all night and then it has a spike, that's that heart attack in the early morning hours. That's how Anthony Scalia died.
Interesting. What are there any studies or data sources around what percentage of Americans suffer from sleep apnea of some kind?
So the people who have sleep apnea syndrome, so have all the daytime fatigue and all the symptoms, that's only maybe 9%. If you have some type of sleep disorder breathing, that's more like 49%.
Wow.
So there's a lot of people who aren't feeling tired during the day. Like, I went and got my sleep study because my wife was complaining about snoring. And then, lo and behold, I have severe sleep apnea.
Yeah. Any advice you just generally share with people around either just getting better sleep in their lives or if they think they might have a problem, how they can learn more?
It takes women 10 years between their first symptoms and their actual diagnosis of sleep apnea. And I want people to advocate for themselves and to not just life is hard and kids and work, and know if you're getting a good night's sleep, you shouldn't feel tired all the time.
That's a wonderful piece of advice. 10 years is a long time. So Dr. Kate, you are a dentist in addition to addressing sleep conditions. Can you talk a little bit about jaw necrosis?
So jaw necrosis is a rare complication that can happen after someone's been taking a bisphosphonate, like Fosamax or Zometa. And how those bisphosphonates work, there's two types of cells. They're in your bones. There's things that build up bone and there are things that eat away at bone. And those medications stop the cells that eat away at bone. So that's how your bone becomes more dense. Unfortunately, the blood supply shrinks up for that dense bone. So if you get a wound to that bone, it can't heal properly.
So the reason why a woman would be taking bisphosphonates would be?
Osteoporosis is the most common, or cancer. And so the risk associated with osteonecrosis goes up if you have an IV bisphosphonate versus an oral bisphosphonate. So for cancer, that's when you're going to get the IV. And prior to getting that IV, it's really important to take care of any dental concerns you might have in your mouth. That's the time to get the deep cleaning, any extractions that need to be done, any root canals that need to be done. If you're taking oral medication and you've been taking it longer than 3 years, that's when your risk goes up. But the current recommendation is to only take the oral medication for 3 years and then have a 5-year break and go back and forth.
Well, thank you. We could talk more and more, but I think we've hit the high comments. We will follow up this podcast with links to your information, Dr. Kate, and to resources that you mentioned, the great video that gives you some exercises. Thank you, Sonya, for sharing your story today. This was a special treat to have both doctor and patient with us. So thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in for our interview with Dr. Katharine Christian and Sonya, a patient who's much happier since her diagnosis and treatment for sleep apnea. You can find Dr. Christian at sleep911.com. That's sleep911.com. Be sure to subscribe to Genev on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud so you never miss an episode. I'll see you soon. Thanks for listening to the Genev podcast series. We welcome your feedback at genev.com. That's GENNEVE.com. You can follow us on Facebook and subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher, and you'll never miss an episode. The Genev podcast series is produced by Shannon Perry. Theme music by Smitty. And until next time, watch the Genev website for new stories and offers all dedicated to women's midlife health.